Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. We've got you covered. Traditional leagues, dynasty league, PPR league, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Hello there, everybody, and welcome to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. All right, guys, I'm your host, as always, Marcus Vargas, and today's show is going to be pretty interesting for you guys. We're actually going to start off today's show talking about some drama that's been swirling around the league. Later on, we're going to talk about some bold predictions I have for next season. And that includes, just regular football and fantasy football. And we're going to play some Would You Rather today. So, just to get things started, I want to say I hope you guys are doing well. Hope you guys are healthy and safe. Again, I've been dealing with allergies, so forgive me if I sound a bit stuffy. They're hitting me hard this year, even though, I'm inside, which makes me a little bit more frustrated. But nonetheless, let's get started here. Okay, so I'm sure many of you, if not all, have heard about the recent drama that's sort of been swirling around regarding Michael Thomas and Devontae Parker of the Miami Dolphins. So just to give you sort of the quick rundown, basically there was a post on Instagram, I believe it was NFL that posted it, it basically said, what's harder to do? Would you rather be guarded by Stephon Gilmore? Is that harder, or is it harder to break up a pass from while Mike Thomas is catching it? Devontae Parker, he comments and he chooses the selection that said it's harder to be guarded by Stephon Gilmore than it is to break up a pass being caught by Mike Thomas. Well, for some reason or another, Mike Thomas takes full offense. And I'm actually going to try and get the full exchange that they had, because honestly, it was pretty surprising and to me, kind of uncalled for. So actually, hold on, let me try and get this here. And if you haven't seen this, you'll see why, because honestly, to me, I'm on the side of Devontae Parker. So I'll just give that precursor to this whole discussion, because to me it doesn't make any sense. Devontae Parker was just giving his honest opinion. He said nothing about Michael Thomas. He literally just, in his comment, he just said A, because there was an A selection for Stephon Gilmore and a B selection for Mike Thomas. He just said A. He said nothing about Mike Thomas. Didn't say Mike Thomas is a bum by any means. Nothing like that. But Michael Thomas fires back. Let's see if I can get this here. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so it was NFL and Fox posted a question Friday asking which is harder, A, recording a catch while covered by Stephon Gilmore, or B, breaking up a pass intended for Saints wide receiver Michael Thomas. Okay, Devontae Parker just commented A, that's it, and then boom, it just goes downhill from there. Right here, Michael Thomas responds, for you, yes, go run some numbers up, then you can talk. I lapped you and you've been in the league longer than me, first rounder. What? That's kind of crazy. So Parker comes back. Got some hard feeling there, brother? 3 question marks. Let me get targeted 300 times a game, which is kind of funny, actually. And that's because, if you guys didn't know, Michael Thomas led the league in targets by about, I think it was 30 targets. And I'm pretty sure the person in second place wasn't even a wide receiver. It was, I believe it was Christian McCaffrey, the running back, but I'm not sure. Yeah, it says here he has, okay, League high in targets. Sorry, I mistook. I think he had 30 more receptions than the second leader. Right here. League high in targets, 185, right? That's 18 more targets than the next closest, which is Julio Jones, who was also clear-cut number one for his team. So then Thomas responds, in other words, you weak. They don't even put your name in the same sentence as me. Remember that. Okay. He then continues with a new comment. You still not going to do nothing. It took you 6 years and 17 weeks to have a good game. GTFOH, which, you guys know what that means. He goes, blame your parents, not no QB. Yeesh. And then so Devontae Parker responds, quit crying, bruh. And he has a pair of laughing emojis. And then Michael Thomas replies, you heard what I said. Okay, and then there's more to this. Devontae Parker says, I didn't hear bleep, playboy. And then Michael Thomas finishes it with, you can't even get a seat at the table. I really don't understand this, and I don't like this from Michael Thomas. It just makes him look like a crybaby. And that seems to be the sort of consensus feelings when you look at the comments, and you look at, of course, you look at meme pages, things like that. And it just, to me, this was really uncalled for. I think, first of all, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. And Devontae Parker was just making a selection for a quick poll. There was no disrespect intended. He didn't call out Michael Thomas by name. He didn't claim he was the best receiver. Didn't claim that, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And it makes sense, Devontae Parker as in the same division as Stephon Gilmore faces him twice a year. So, he sort of has that, closer connection to that and my experience with that rather than having experience breaking up a pass intended for Michael Thomas. So it really makes sense that Devontae Parker, would pick that and not pick something that he has, no experience in. For Michael Thomas here, honestly, I lost respect for him, definitely. To me, this was very immature, very uncalled for. I think I don't know if he's been watching The Last Dance a bit too much, and he's trying to be, super Michael Jordan-esque and take no crap from anybody. But to me, it doesn't really make any sense. No one was questioning his skill or talent, and it seems just honestly insecure. It just, we recognize that you had a great season, but, Devontae Parker, he has a point. It's very, very clear that Michael Thomas is basically the only receiver on that team. You know what I mean? And if your name's not Michael Thomas, you're barely getting any targets or catches or touchdowns. So it's unfortunate. I understand the numbers get to people's heads, but I wish Michael Thomas was a bit more humble here. I don't think he had to take it where he took it coming at Devontae Parker's career because, at the end of the day, let's be real here. If someone told me, would you rather have Josh Rosen or Ryan Fitzpatrick thrown to you or Drew Brees or Teddy Bridgewater? We all know the duo that people are going to pick, right? So it's a little messed up, and I don't care what people say. Wide receivers benefit from great quarterbacks and vice versa. It's something I was talking about the other day when I said, what I do like about football and why I sort of stray away from having that, GOAT conversation when it comes to football is because nothing happens in a vacuum. And in that way, no matter who you say is the best at something, someone will always pull up the certain teammates that they had, the quarterback that they had throwing to them. And, I guess the only time you could say that someone was actually the greatest is if they had horrible people all around them and still succeeded. Like, DeAndre Hopkins had Tom Savage thrown to him, Brock Osweiler, things like that, and he was still putting up great numbers. Michael Thomas has not had to deal with a subpar quarterback. I'll remind you, Teddy Bridgewater just got signed to a contract to go start for the Carolina Panthers, and Drew Brees is walking into the Hall of Fame. So, I wish Michael Thomas was a bit more humble here. He owes his success to a lot more people than he thinks. I understand he's a great receiver. I'm not going to take that away from him. But he is benefiting a lot from getting a ton of targets, having a Hall of Fame quarterback under center. And I just really hope, at least for his sake, so he doesn't look silly, that when Drew Brees eventually retires and they find their replacement, that he keeps up this level of success. I know he's not going to keep up, the insane, catch numbers and breaking records and 1,700 yards a year, but he just, better keep it up. And I think he can. He's a great receiver. He's only 27 years old. But this wasn't a good look for him. Something that's definitely going to, be a little stain on not on the legacy, but just at least right now, in recent memory, he's not looking good for this. Also, it's just, sort of attacking a player who's not on that great of a team. I think Devontae Parker is definitely a great player. Of course, he's not on the level of Michael Thomas at the moment. But he deserves respect in his own right as well. He's playing on a very, very poor team who is on the verge of changing culture and becoming, probably coming back to that winning culture. So, yeah, that was just my thoughts on that situation, guys. Definitely, I'm going to give, I guess if you had to give someone a win for that little beef, I'm going to give it to, I guess you would give it to Michael Thomas because he came so hard. But honestly, I'm going to give it to Devontae Parker because, he stayed sort of respectful, not as respectful as you could, I guess. He wasn't coming at Michael Thomas's career. He's just kind of stating things that, are kind of obvious. He gets the most targets, and that makes sense why he gets the most catches. And he was basically very sensitive over something that didn't really require him to lash out like that. So, like this from Devontae Parker here, just sort of defending himself. This is a bad look for Michael Thomas. But, yeah, so with that, guys, we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to get into some bold predictions for next season. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Alrighty, guys, welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. We just got done talking about the Michael Thomas, Devontae Parker drama and, my opinions on that. just wanted to add too, man, I wish people were more focused on lifting each other up, especially in times like this, than tearing each other down. But we move on. Right now, I want to get into some bold predictions I have for next season and next fantasy football season, and basically just give you my thoughts on some things that I think could very well happen. Even though they're bold, they're not, crazy out of nowhere like, Patrick Mahomes gets traded to the Raiders. It's nothing like that. So, to get started, I'm going to start off with my Chiefs here. Clyde Edwards-Helaire will be a top 10 fantasy football running back. Okay, and honestly, guys, of course, there's no sample size that we can say of him in the NFL, things like that, but do you remember when Kareem Hunt was a part of the Chiefs? He was an absolute monster. I think, even though they're different style of runners, Clyde Edwards-Helaire has the potential to be a top fantasy football running back, just how Kareem Hunt was when he was a Kansas City Chief. I understand that people think that there's going to be a timeshare, and it's going to be, he's sharing the field with Damien Williams, but that might last a couple games. Then it will be clear that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is the top running back on the team, and he should be the starter and the number one guy, the every down kind of guy, even in passing downs. Him going to the Kansas City Chiefs was absolutely insane. I think he was the only college rusher with 1,000 yards and 50 receptions. That is literally the perfect kind of running back that we need. Definitely need a guy who's going to be catching passes because, even when people think the Kansas City Chiefs should be running the ball, we're passing the ball, and that sort of work. Short passes work as our run game. So loving the addition. Still am going to be talking about him a lot. I think, he has potential clearly to be the top rookie coming out of, for fantasy football coming out of that draft. Of course, there's other running backs, Jonathan Taylor, who have a lot of potential, but I think he's going to have a tougher time getting the starting job. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire, guys, top 10 fantasy football running back. Okay. Next bold prediction, the Patriots defense does a complete 180 and is no longer elite. Now, guys, the Patriots lost, key people on the defense during the offseason, especially one being Kyle Van Noy, who ended up on the Dolphins. He was definitely an overlooked guy. He was a great linebacker. But it's not only because of the losses they suffered during the offseason and the lack of, replacements. I believe this more so because, one, they have the toughest projected schedule for the 2020 season, and two, their offense, I think, is going to be pretty awful, and I really don't think that their offense is going to somehow take a leap forward and be able to keep their defense off of the field. I think they're going to struggle a lot, especially early on. Jarrett Stidham, all that pressure coming in, new era, new regime, being a part of that franchise that has won so much and having the expectations following after Tom Brady, who basically won for 20 years straight. I don't think it's going to start off well. I don't think it'll end particularly well. Of course, they'll get better as the season goes on, but I think their defense is going to struggle a lot, particularly because they're going to be on the field a lot because the offense won't be doing much. It only makes sense that offense isn't going to do as good as it was with Tom Brady. I don't think, right now anyone's saying Jarrett Stidham is better than Tom Brady is. Even right now, with Tom Brady being as old as he is, the last time we saw Jarrett Stidham, he was throwing a pick six against the Jets, who were getting demolished, and then got benched. And Tom Brady was put back into the game. So, from what we've seen from Jarrett Stidham, nothing too special, nothing wowed by. And I think, it's going to be a tough time. And a lot of people are going to draft their defense early, and a lot of people are going to be disappointed. And I'm talking about, of course, in fantasy football. Okay, another prediction I have for someone in the Patriots division: the Dolphins will win the AFC East. Now, I understand why people think, the Dolphins stink or they're slouches, but I mean, Brian Flores is doing a really good job, I think, turning this team around and changing that culture. I think, their last 9 games, not last 7 or 9 games, they won 5 games. I know a lot of people think the Dolphins are the laughingstock of the league, but I mean, they didn't do as bad of a job last year, as the Redskins. as the Bengals, as the Lions, so we have to remember that. They went 5-11, which is not, of course that's really, really bad, but if you think of this, the Chargers were also 5-11. The Browns, who on paper had so much talent, were only one win better at 6-10. So it's really, I understand why, people think that they're pretty horrible. But do you know that the Giants were 4-12? I mean, clearly, because they had, the draft picks, but, the Cardinals were 5-10-1. These are teams who, people perceive to be better. The Panthers were also 5-11. These are teams that people perceive to be better than the Miami Dolphins with the same or worse record. So pay attention to the Miami Dolphins next year, guys, because they've done a great job adding veterans to their defense, which is Brian Flores' specialty. Adding Byron Jones, Cal Van Noy. There was a defensive lineman they added that I was a fan of. I'm blanking on his name. And then, in the draft, getting Tua Tagovailoa, I mean, I love that they did that. But, adding offense in the draft to add that sort of talent, they got Tua, they get the offensive tackle in the first 2 rounds. Doing that to sort of help the offense out while also adding, great defenders in the offseason, to me, was very, very smart of them, and I think it's going to propel them. And I think, we saw a culture shift, towards the second half of the season, where, in the beginning of the season, everybody's thinking they're a joke. They get absolutely blown out early on in the first couple games, and it felt like, especially in fantasy football, basically any team that was playing the Dolphins start their players because they're going to go off, right? But towards the end of the season, you see them beat the Eagles. You see them beat the Patriots. These are not any slouches of teams. I understand, the Eagles were sort of underperforming, but, I mean, that's not just an easy team to beat. Remember, that team beat the Packers. The Eagles beat the Packers, right? So, the Dolphins were, doing pretty well to end the season. I think they're going to carry that momentum forward, and they're going to surprise a lot of people. So, I think, people definitely need to keep an eye on them. I think they have a chance to win the AFC East. All right. Next bold prediction, and this might be my last one before our break, and then we'll continue, of course. Miles Sanders will rise into RB1 status. And I understand a lot of people are, they're sort of concerned that Miles Sanders will be in a timeshare with Boston Scott, but I think what we saw from Miles Sanders to end the season with Jordan Howard hurt was pretty spectacular. He was putting up great numbers, and I think in Philly right now, it's been so long since they found, that one guy. And even when, they made that Super Bowl run, it was the 1-2 punch, even sort of the 1-2-3 punch of, Corey Clement, LeGarrette Blount, and Jay Ajayi that pushed him to a Super Bowl. And we have to remember, Miles Sanders finished as a top 15 fantasy football running back last season, and he wasn't the clear-cut starter. If we look at, from week 12 on, he has 11 points, 21 10 points, which was kind of a dud, 35 points, 26 points, and of course his last game, I think that was the game Boston Scott went off, so Miles Sanders didn't do much. He only had 8 points, but I mean, that 26, 35, and 21, I think that's going to become more common next season, as we know that, Jordan Howard's not on that team anymore. They have a bit of a more, more clear sense of, of Miles Sanders' talent, his ability, and I think he's going to be the clear-cut number one. I don't know if, how I feel about Boston Scott necessarily. I know a couple people are concerned because of that huge game he had against the Giants, but I think Miles Sanders is the guy to do it. Maybe he's in a timeshare for for to begin the season. But we have to remember too, Boston Scott's huge game against New York had to do with mostly his touchdowns. He had 3 touchdowns in that game. And I mean, he had a bunch of yards receiving, but the touchdowns are what propelled it to be so huge. And of course, maybe he steals some touchdowns from Miles Sanders here and there. But Miles Sanders is great, receiving and running. So I think, like I always say, guys, if your running back is catching passes out of the backfield, that's an insta boost. If you're playing PPR of any form, and so we like that. Miles Sanders has the ability to do that as well. So my last prediction for the break, guys: Miles Sanders rises into the sort of RB1 territory. Along, Clyde Edwards-Helaire will be up there too. Let's say Miles Sanders is going to be super high, maybe top 12. Let's say top 12. I won't give him top 10. He'll be a top 12 kind of guy with top 10 potential. All right, so with that, guys, we're going to take a short break. And when we get back, we'll continue with some bold predictions and, of course, keep the show going. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back after this short break.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Alrighty, guys, welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. We continue here now with some more bold predictions. I didn't get to touch on all of them in that first segment there, so we continue here. I finished off talking about Miles Sanders. This next one here, it doesn't feel as bold of, not that bold of a prediction, but since there's so much hype around this player, I think it's pretty bold. Joe Burrow's first season will be wildly disappointing. Now, I understand that, Joe Burrow, amazing college quarterback, perhaps the best season we've ever seen. Yes, the best season we've ever seen from a college football quarterback. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be great in the NFL, right? We've seen it time and time again. Doesn't even need to be said at this point. The only reason that, I have a feeling that, Joe Burrow's first season might not be, as great as some people think is because that organization is so bad. And that team isn't as good as we think. I understand Joe Mixon's a great weapon. A.J. Green is only getting older and has had such severe struggles with injury that I'm worried about that. Tyler Boyd, while being, their top receiver while A.J. Green has been gone, and people look at him as a pretty good receiver in terms of fantasy football. I think he's overhyped. I think he's only a top 25 kind of receiver. And I don't know if you guys know this, but in terms of the top 20 leaders and catches last season, he was second worst in his catch percentage of 60.8%. The only one worse was Jarvis Landry at 60.1%. But we know the Cleveland Browns were a mess last season. I think for some reason, we give Tyler Boyd a lot of credit, I think mostly because he's on such a bad team with a bad quarterback and he was making do. But I just don't know at this point in time also, and I understand the potential that they have. If they all stay healthy and can play well, having John Ross, having A.J. Green, and Tyler Boyd, that's huge. But I don't know how much confidence I have in John Ross and A.J. Green, to stay healthy the entire season. It just feels like very wishful thinking at this point. And, again, it's his first season in the NFL. He's learning, how this all works, a new system. And he's not going into a team where, it's not Patrick Mahomes to the Chiefs, and I hate to keep sort of bringing that up to seem like, I'm just sort of tooting my team's horn. But, that was a situation, something like Jordan Love. They're going to situations where it seems ideal for them, where they can sit out, learn. I don't know if, Joe Burrow to the Bengals is ideal for him, right? So it's hard for me to say he's going to come out and be the clear-cut rookie of the year, right? So I think there is a really good chance that, Joe Burrow is going to look more like a bust than he is a star in his first season. But I don't think he's going to be a bust overall. I just think it's going to take a lot of time to get used to. And I think if he does end up having a good season, it'll be a good half a season. The first half of the season will be pretty, average, in terms of, what he, in regards to, in comparison to what he did in college, and, all the talent he has and all the hype surrounding him. For the little while here, he's not going to be doing too hot, and I think that'll prevent him from finishing as sort of a top 15 quarterback in fantasy football. But maybe towards the end of the season, on a points per game basis, he rises into top 15 status. But as of right now, I have no reason to believe that that'll be true. Well, not no reason, but okay. Another bold prediction, guys, and this one might be a little crazy. Calvin Ridley becomes the consistent a consistent player with wide receiver one potential in Atlanta. Now, honestly, guys, I think this might be Calvin Ridley's year where we start to see him sort of become the heir after Julio Jones. We might start seeing him overtake Julio Jones. It's sad to think about because Julio Jones certainly is one of my favorite players, definitely one of my favorite players to watch. Amazing. It's probably the best receiver that the Falcons have ever had. Absolutely insane. The catches he can make, freakish athleticism. I love the guy, but he is going to be 30. I think he is 31 years old right now, and getting into your 30s as a wide receiver, the decline starts to happen very, very fast. It's not very. It's not. Something that takes. It's not a slow grind or slow drip, so to speak. It's very, very quick, and I think, Calvin Ridley is a fine receiver. I think he has a lot of potential. So I think that this is the season where we see him sort of pull, Chris Godwin was sort of a surprise, right? Like that, and overtaking, Mike Evans as a top receiver in Tampa Bay. And I think, we might see Calvin Ridley do something similar, and he's going to be a solid fantasy football wide receiver. Young, talented guy. It's just a matter of Julio Jones getting old and the drop-off sort of happening. It has nothing to do with, Julio Jones it's probably going into the Hall of Fame, right? So, this is not a dig on Julio Jones. But if we look, at some numbers here, there were 5 of 13 games. Ridley, he did, miss a couple games. But in 5 of those games, he saw 8+ targets, which to me is definitely not concerning, but it's a tell to sort of the trend we're going to see as time goes on. I don't think it's going to be, sort of I think there's going to be sort of a Tampa Bay situation where it's just 2 very solid receivers. I don't think Julio Jones will be a clear-cut number 1. It's sort of, basically a sort of tandem of wide receiver. I could see them both having over 1,000 yards next season and Calvin Ridley emerging as the new star. Okay. Got another bold prediction here for another wide receiver, Marquise Brown becomes a top 20 fantasy football wide receiver, and I think he might have some potential to get a little bit higher than that. So I think, last season we didn't get the full potential of Marquise Brown and Lamar Jackson that we could have because of Marquise Brown's injury troubles. He didn't have a full offseason with Lamar Jackson. He finished as number 46 in terms of fantasy football wide receiver rank, and I think next season, fully healthy, Lamar Jackson throwing the ball more, getting more comfortable, we're going to see Marquise Brown take a huge leap forward. And if he finishes as a top 20 guy, that means he's moving up at least 26 spots, which honestly I think is doable. I know, that first game against Miami, I'm writing that off as a fluke. 147 yards on 4 catches only, 2 touchdowns against a really just horrible Miami defense that didn't know what they were doing. I think, that Arizona game, we see 8 and 86. That'll become the more common thing that Marquise Brown is doing. Of course, he's going to sprinkle in 100-yard games. Of course, 100 yards and a touchdown. I could see, 5 catches, $122, a touchdown here and there because he's such a good deep threat. So I think that's he's going to become sort of a Deshaun Jackson for Lamar Jackson. And I think as long as he stays healthy, we're going to see him have a huge leap next season. And of course, I'm sticking by my story that I believe that, John Harbaugh knows that Lamar Jackson needs to throw the ball more. They need to, get these wide receivers involved more for sure. So I think Marquise Brown, they want him to be the number one. I hope, be sort of their Tyreek Hill. And if he's, their Tyreek Hill, then, I know what Tyreek Hill can do to defenses. So for sure, I'm liking this. There's not many wide receivers on that team, to sort of threaten that number one spot. I know they drafted one, but I think he's more of a slot guy, I believe. But certainly is a weapon. But I think Marquise Brown is their guy with that kind of speed. The NFL is, moving towards, just having speedsters. We saw the Raiders take Henry Ruggs first, as the first receiver off the board when a lot of people thought, it'd be Jerry Jeudy or CeeDee Lamb. And there's good reason for that. We just watched the Super Bowl champs win with their top receiver being an absolute burner, not a, 6'3", go up and get the ball. Even though Tyreek Hill has ups and can definitely go up and get a ball, first and foremost, he is an absolute burner who's going to peel the top off of defenses and open up the field for the rest of the team, right? So when you have speed burners like that, it also benefits the other guys on the team. So hopefully we see, the Lamar Jackson to Marquise Brown connection more and more often next season. I don't even know if that's sort of a, how bold is that prediction, right? It's only bold because Marquise Brown, not that he had a poor season. I guess you could say it was a poor season, but it mostly had to do with injury, just because he finished so low in the rankings. That's why I guess it's bold now, because I think he's going to make such a huge leap. All right, and one last prediction here before the break. David Johnson's going to have a bounce-back year. Okay. Now, I know we are several years removed from his breakout year. I think he had 1,000-plus rushing yards, 800-plus receiving yards. He was insane. I think, and it feels ugly coming out of my mouth, saying David Johnson's going to have a bounce-back year, but he's going to be on a very talented offense. His quarterback's going to be super talented, and I think he has a lot to prove. He lost his job to Kenyon Drake, a guy who was on the Dolphins who barely got playtime. And I think, he definitely knows that, he has to prove himself, prove his worth, prove that contract that he has, that he's definitely being overpaid for, and show that the Texans didn't make the worst trade in recent memory, right? If he comes out and he becomes a huge weapon for the Texans, that trade is going to look a lot better than it did when it happened. So I think David Johnson, with his, his great receiving ability, his great running ability, of course, he just has to find that peak form that he was in, and stay healthy. And I think, this could be really good for the Texans, and he could have a bounce back year. So that's my last bold prediction. David Johnson bounces back with the Houston Texans and helps them out. But with that, guys, we're going to go into our short break and after play a little bit of Would You Rather. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back after this short break.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Alrighty guys, welcome back to the show. We move on to our next segment here, and it's going to be sort of new for us. Actually, it is new. We've never done it before here. But it's going to be a game of Would You Rather. Okay, I got a bunch of questions here that I'll give my take on. And it's basically, pretty clear cut. Would you rather have this or that? Some stuff, actually, I think most of this is actually just about the season. Like next regular season, but I definitely will add fantasy football questions as the time goes on, and the more and more we get into the fantasy football season. So just to start off though, for our first edition of it here, it's going to be mostly focused on the NFL season. Okay, first question: would you rather have Odell stay in Cleveland or leave? For me here, I think I'd rather have him leave. I think, and the reason for that is I think, people only, they're going to say, oh, it was only one bad year, and it wasn't really that bad of a year. But I think it's just sort of the vibe I get from Odell in Cleveland. I don't think the market's big enough. It's not, I think Odell needs to be on a team, like the New York Giants. It was a great market for him. People have talked about LA. I think he just needs to move teams. Where, I don't know exactly, but I don't think the Cleveland Browns are the best fit for Odell Beckham. Also, not with all the talent that they have. Odell feels like a guy, there are some guys who are meant to just be the top dog on the team and to have a lot of people, be not as good as them. It's Odell's a diva. We know Odell's a diva. So, going on a team with not that many personalities, not that much talent, probably would benefit him more. That's why, when he was on the Giants putting up huge numbers and he was the best player on that team, it made sense, right? And I mean, it didn't make sense for him to be a diva, but it made sense why he was such a big figure. The team was pretty bad and he was the best player on the team. He goes to Cleveland where the roster is absolutely loaded, and they're all doing poor, and it just kind of takes away from Odell's legacy. I think he belongs on a different team. I'm not sure if him, and Jarvis, while it is great that they're friends, being on the same team might not be the best thing for them because they're both solid receivers. And it just takes receptions away from Odell, who I believe needs a lot of targets and a lot of receptions to truly shine. Excuse me. I also don't believe Baker Mayfield right now is the best quarterback for him to be with because, yes, he had Eli Manning who wasn't very good, but when, Odell was Eli Manning's clear-cut number one guy, right? And Odell's clearly not Baker Mayfield's clear-cut number one guy. So I would rather him leave. I know he would stay. I know he will stay, but or I have the feeling he will. But I would rather him leave sooner rather than later to see him sort of bounce back with another team. But yeah, so that is that. Now, another guy potentially moving. Would I rather see the Packers move on from Rodgers sooner or later? Not saying that this would happen, but I would much rather them move on from Rodgers sooner rather than later, just because I want to see him get started with that new chapter as soon as possible. I don't want him to, get into his early 40s and then go somewhere where we're all expecting him to just basically go and end his career and ride off into the sunset, right? I want him to go to another team while he's still as fresh as possible at this point, make a statement, possibly, compete for a Super Bowl, maybe win one, and then, sort of prove that the Packers all along made a mistake. The Packers have made it clear they're not necessarily too worried about winning right now. They're worried about the future. They're not worried about helping Aaron Rodgers win another Super Bowl. And for that reason, I think, the bridge is basically, it's on fire right now. Not complete ash yet, but I'm hoping that he moves on from the Packers sooner rather than later. It sucks because, he said he wanted to retire Packer and play into his 40s. Clearly, they don't feel the same way. So yeah, I would love to see, Aaron Rodgers, do the Tom Brady, do the Joe Montana, and just move on. So, next question here. Would I rather see Brady win the ring first or Bill Belichick? This is a toughie, guys. I would rather see... it's tough. It's tough. I think seeing Brady win the ring first is a better story. But me personally, man, I don't know. I think I'd like to see Bill Belichick win the ring first without Brady, just because I'm a hater, and and I would like to see everyone's theory of Tom Brady's a system quarterback and he's not as good as we all think. I'd like to see that sort of come true to help my case. Building Patrick Mahomes' case is making a run for the best quarterback ever. If Belichick wins it without Brady, it severely tarnishes Brady's legacy, I believe, at least. I don't care how many rings. If the first time you leave, Belichick goes and wins a ring with, struggling for a year with no quarterback and then rebuilding a team in a way, won one before Brady does, or wins one before Brady does, that would be insane. I think it's much easier right now for Brady to win the ring first. That's why I'm going to go ahead and say I'd rather see Belichick win it first. Okay. Next question. Which division worst team would I rather see do a 180? Oof. Okay, this one is definitely tough because I got two. The Cardinals were the division worst, and the Dolphins were the division worst. I might have to cheat this question, guys. I don't know. See, because, if the Cardinals are, doing a 180, that means they're competing and possibly winning a division that is very, very hard with the Rams, Seahawks, and 49ers. But if the Miami Dolphins pull that 180, they have an easier division to take over. I think it would be much more of a shock if the Dolphins win their division, even though their division is easier because of how bad people perceive their team to be last season. And that would also mean, in my opinion, that Tua Tagovailoa is probably going to be the starter because I don't see Ryan Fitzpatrick, taking them very, very far. He's very inconsistent. Even though he can get the job done, he showed us time and time again. Interesting. It's interesting. I guess I'm going to go ahead and say the Cardinals just because, they have, I'd rather see them with the harder path. But I'm really even here, guys. I'd rather see either one of these, two teams winning their division or pulling 180 and competing for the division win would be very, very satisfying. I'd love it if the Cardinals did because that means, DeAndre Hopkins is going off, Kyler Murray's having a breakout season, and the Cardinals are, the best they've been in a while. But if the Dolphins turn it around, it's a great story. The Dolphins can finally, kind of get restored as a winning team. They haven't won in a while. I mean, they did make the playoffs, a few years ago, if we do remember that. They made the wild card, I believe, when Jay Ajayi was still on the team. But other than that, they've just been synonymous with losing. Those are two good stories. Other teams, I guess, yes, it would be cool, to see the Bengals. But if the Bengals, if they win their division or turn it around, that means the Ravens or Steelers are doing poorly. And I'd rather see the Steelers or Ravens winning. For someone like the Redskins, who are the division worst, and the Chargers for sure not, because that means my Chiefs aren't winning the division. For someone like the Redskins, that means the Cowboys or Eagles are severely underperforming yet again. So yeah, I'd have to, say either the Dolphins or the Cardinals. I guess I'd give it to the Cardinals just so I can, give an answer. Okay, next one. Who would I rather see win the NFC East, Eagles, Cowboys, or other? Eagles. Sorry, Cowboys fans. Sorry. You guys know I'm a Cowboys hater as much as the next guy. Gotta roll with the Eagles here. Yes, I'm biased. I live in Philly, guys. When the Eagles are winning, the spirits are great. The vibe of the city is nice and alive. Love it. When they're losing, you know how those fans are. They're horrible. Very sore losers. And honestly, I just think, I like the Eagles organization. I like what they do. Howie Roseman being aggressive, when he went and won that Super Bowl. I like Doug Peterson. He was a coordinator in Kansas City. So yes, I'm definitely biased here. I like Carson Wentz over Dak Prescott. Sorry guys. So I'd rather see the Eagles take the division for sure. Also because it would come to the dismay of so many crazy Cowboy fans across the nation. All right, and for the last one, who would I rather see start Week 1, Tua or Ryan Fitzpatrick? I'm gonna go with. Oh man, the fan in me wants to see Tua start Week 1, but I'm gonna be realistic here, and I'm gonna say I'd rather see Ryan Fitzpatrick start just because I want to know that Tua's fully healthy and ready, and I don't want them to rush him back if they don't have to. If Ryan Fitzpatrick starts struggling, then we clearly see, okay, it's time for Tua. It's time for him to step up, and he can do his thing, and it's not too bad. Sitting out a game or two doesn't mean you're just gonna suck when you come in because you didn't start the season. We saw Baker Mayfield go on a tear his rookie season, starting behind Tyrod. So, while the fan in me would love to see Tua start and carry the team 16 games, I think I'd rather him sit behind Ryan Fitzpatrick a couple games. But if Ryan Fitzpatrick goes out there and lays an egg Week 1 and 2, go ahead, throw Tua in there. So, that's my would you rather for today, guys. And with that, we're going to take a short break and move on to the next segment. So, stay tuned, guys. We're definitely going to keep updating that. I think that's a cool little segment. We can keep doing some would you rathers, and then, of course, tie it more into fantasy football. But with that, guys, stay tuned. We'll be right back after this short break.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Okay, it's pretty evident, we're all going through this COVID-19 struggle together, and it's, what I meant to say was it's become evident that now, restrictions are loosening up, cities, states, etc. are basically, trying to, as fast as possible, reopen and have things back to normal. With that has come some announcements, from the commish and the league, for plans for, the NFL and teams to reopen. So I just wanted to give my thoughts on this and, just talk about it because it's something that definitely is very, very important and if it's done the right way, can be very successful. But so basically, as of today, NFL teams can begin reopening their facilities if state and local governments will allow it. That was a memo sent to all 32 teams, I think it was last Friday. Roger Goodell sent that memo to all 32 teams. He stressed that, every NFL club must be in compliance with any additional public health requirements in their jurisdiction and have implemented the protocols that were developed by League Medical Officer Dr. Alan Sills and distributed to all clubs on May 6th. Now, facilities have been closed since late March, obviously due to the coronavirus pandemic. And he also says clubs unable to meet these criteria on May 19th may reopen their facilities on the earliest date thereafter on which they are able to meet the criteria. So basically, as long as you meet the specific criteria after today, you'll be able to reopen your facilities. Now, I do like this. I'm definitely happy to see this sort of thing happening. We've been in quarantine for quite some time. I've definitely, been uber cautious, as to, sort of limit my contact with people outside of my home. To see that things are, people are trying to get things to go back to normal is nice. However, like I said, because I am so cautious, it worries me because I don't want anything to be rushed or anything to be done too soon. I know the prospect of having things go back to normal at this point seems like, it's sort of like fantasy-like, where it's like, oh man, I can't wait. Everyday trivial things have now become luxuries, right? I can't wait to just go to, sit in at a restaurant. I can't wait to be able to, go to a certain store. You know what I mean? Things like that, to buy clothing. I can't wait to go walk around the mall. Things like that have become, people miss them so much that it seems that people are becoming desperate. We actually saw, Tom Brady. There's some pictures of Tom Brady and, Tampa Bay Bucks, running a little practice at a Tampa Bay high school, I believe it was. And so, things are slowly, starting to get more normal. But there have been talks about, an inevitable second wave, right? And experts have warned against, excuse me, reopening too fast or too quickly or easing restrictions too much, and risking the start of another wave that would, again, make us have to do this all over again, right? So that's where my concern is. I know we can't sit in quarantine forever. However, sometimes it is necessary, to see, there are a lot of people who protest the quarantine for some reason or another. It's tough because while I guess, it's easy to understand the sentiment of wanting to leave home and not being allowed to and your rights, et cetera, if we are irresponsible with this virus, it will only get worse and come back the same as it just happened, right? So it's great. I can't wait for the, facilities to reopen, teams to get into their off-season programs. Of course, I want training camp to be a thing. It's going to be very, very crucial for, these incoming rookies and teams with additions, new veterans, new coaching staff, et cetera, to have, off-season, an active, physical in-person off-season and training camp because, should these things be forced to go virtual without, postponing them and just having to go straight into the season, it's going to be very, very difficult and different for teams to, sort of get into the swing of things. So, if it's postponed, that's fine. Whatever it takes for the league to reopen safely and so that, coronavirus isn't too much of a threat to ruin sports, then I'll take it. I don't mind watching sports with no fans in the stands. I don't mind it at all. I understand it's way different, like the UFC fights that just recently happened with no fans there. It is a different experience, but it's something I could certainly get used to if it means that I can have sports to watch during this pandemic. As long as everything's done according to a strict protocol and everyone's being safe, then, that's fine with me. Also, just to touch on, Tom Brady's workout that he organized with his teammates, it was said to be in accordance with, league protocol. They weren't breaking any rules, whatever that is. I don't know, whatever that may be, because, everyone is, touching the ball. I'm not sure, if the league has certain things, the players have to be a certain feet apart, which is definitely possible. Yeah, I don't think he's doing anything wrong. I just wanted to make that clear because I know in the past I've talked about Dak Prescott. I talked about Tom Brady, going to the neighbor's house, and I've sort of condemned certain actions. But, as long as this was allowed by the league and allowed by the state, then I can, there's nothing wrong with it. But, yeah, those are my thoughts on it, guys. I really, really want the league, I understand how much money, pushing postponing the season and not having fans in the stands, how much money that's going to cost the league. But at the end of the day, I want to have a season, right? I don't want, sort of a horrible situation like what happened to the NBA, unfortunately, to happen to the NFL. What happened to the the XFL, unfortunately. Coronavirus really messed up a lot of things, and it's really, really important that we, take as many precautions as necessary, and not just be caught up in, I want to watch sports, and, the league needs money, and I'm bored, and things like that. I've seen a lot of people sort of be irresponsible, to just because, at the expense of others' health, right? It's sort of getting to the point in the quarantine where people are starting to doubt that coronavirus is a thing, right? Because it's not affecting them or anyone they know personally. And so they're taking more liberties and risks when going outside. But it's important to know, guys, like, this thing is real. All of these places wouldn't be closed down if it wasn't. We wouldn't be stuck in our homes if it wasn't, right? So we just have to keep going, no matter how long this thing takes, and do our part to make it end as fast as possible. Cannot wait for sports to come back. I know that sounds redundant at this point. Every sports fan cannot wait for sports to come back, but I'm sure, you'd rather wait a while than to, come back too early, get a little bit of sports, and have to do this all over again. So, those are my thoughts on it, guys. Hopefully everything settles down sooner rather than later, but you never know with this sort of thing. So yeah, with that, guys, we're going to go into our next break. And of course, after that break, we'll go into our last segment of the show. Just to wrap up this segment here about coronavirus, guys, I hope you continue to stay safe, practice social distancing, basically act like it was, when we had first started the quarantine. That's the best thing you can do. I know there was panic. I'm not saying go full on panic and go panic buying, but, as cautious as everyone was being during the beginning, is how we should be throughout. You know what I mean? And definitely treat this thing like it is serious, even though, it is getting better in some places. It is. But we don't want to be too cautious. All right, guys, with that, let's take a short break, and we'll be right back.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Alrighty, guys, we enter the final segment of today's show of the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Okay, guys, today I want to end today's show talking about some stuff, basically doing in other news, because there's been some interesting articles that I've been reading, some, even if it's not very important, I think it's very interesting, stuff going on around the league. Today, I want to open up with an article where, they were sort of dissecting the schedules, and they talked about how which teams have the easiest stretches throughout the season, with the easiest, based on, strength of opponent, obviously. Now, I just want to talk about number one here because it's getting sort of concerning for me as a Chiefs fan, knowing that there's only one top seed with a bye week. The Baltimore Ravens were ranked by CBSSports.com to have the easiest opposing stretch at any point during the season. It's in the last 3 weeks of the season, about, the best time you could wish for a great stretch. And they also have already been ranked as having the easiest projected schedule for 2020 overall. So not only do they get the easiest schedule, they're getting the easiest stretch at a very key time during the season. Their last three opponents will be the Jaguars, Giants, and a road game in Week 17 at the Bengals. Now, this is a huge deal considering that 7 teams are now going to be in the postseason, as we all know, from each conference, and that means only one team in each conference is going to get that first round bye, right? So with that one bye up for grabs, this is basically going to mean if the Chiefs, during the Chiefs-Ravens game, whoever wins that game is probably going to have the most likely the winner of that game is most likely going to be the first seed, right? If the Chiefs should lose to the Ravens in that game or vice versa, you can if the Chiefs lose, they're going to have to basically kiss that first round seed goodbye because the Ravens have such an easy schedule, well, at least projected at this point in time. Again, the Chiefs are going to have to, work harder. Not saying that they have such a terribly difficult schedule, but, they don't get to play the Jags, Giants, and Bengals in their last 3 weeks. This article also says you could argue their easy stretch actually starts in week 14 when they play the Browns. It's pretty insane. So they'll end, they'll end the last 4 weeks will be Browns, Jaguars, Giants, and Bengals for their last 4 games of the year. Definitely concerning as a fan of a team in the AFC. I think, Baltimore's going to have a real shot to take that first seed, guys. And looking at this, their schedule and their, that super easy stretch at the end, definitely going to take some luck again for us, or some magic or some big upsets to sort of help the Chiefs lock it down. The Ravens are going to be good. Of course, they're going to regress a bit. I don't think they're going to be as high-powered on offense as they were last season, but they're still a very solid team. Their defense is going to be phenomenal next season. I do think so at this point. So, yeah. Another article that I wanted to go over, it's one that's actually just more funny, kind of interesting. LeBron James revealed that he was offered a contract by the Dallas Cowboys. Now, that to me, I'm not even going to make a joke about Dak Prescott's contract because I don't know what Dak Prescott's asking for. And I don't know if is this a bad or good look for the Cowboys. I don't know. But it's very, very interesting. LeBron James said during the 2011 NBA lockout, he trained for football. And then he said that Jerry Jones offered him a contract. I don't know. It just goes to show, Jerry Jones is all about the business, is all about, the wow factor and making the Cowboys, the team that everybody wants to watch. And that certainly would have done it. I really don't know if that would have been a great idea. But, it's certainly interesting to think about. LeBron, 6'9", 250 plus, huge guy, basically probably could have been a tight end. We know he's athletic enough to catch a ball. And LeBron James actually even, he mentioned that he said this, quote, "I have dreams all the time about being able to play football. It's crazy because I actually never run on the field in my dreams. It always gets to the point where I'm either in the locker room or getting dressed or talking about or seeing the fans. And as soon as I'm about to run on the field, something else happens in my dream. It's like something that it always happens like that." So it's very, very interesting. And he says basically the way he talks about it's like an itch he never really got to scratch. Something that he was definitely interested in. At that point in time, he hadn't yet won an NBA title. And it's kind of weird to think about because when we talk about other players playing other sports, it's a very rare thing. First of all, for have multi-sport professional athletes. But it's not like when Michael Jordan went to play baseball when we already knew, this guy's great, he's amazing. It actually would have made more sense for LeBron back then, he could switch sports. Even though he was great at basketball, he wasn't winning rings or anything like that. So it's definitely interesting to think about. I don't think he ever would have done it. It seems pretty crazy to think about. But to just think from the football standpoint, Jerry Jones offering a professional basketball player a football contract and then being in these football contract tense situations with his own players is kind of funny. I thought that was interesting. Do I think LeBron could have succeeded in the NFL? Maybe. He's a huge athletic guy. I think he could have had definitely some success. I don't think he was going to be a Hall of Famer in football, but interesting to think about. Thought it was something funny. So yeah, I just wanted to share my opinion on that. Another thing actually might be the last thing. Actually, no, I want to talk about this here. Man, the NFL has really been getting bad looks from all of these players being arrested. I know, you guys have seen it. It was pretty insane. I think on Saturday, 4 NFL players were taken into custody. It seemed like every notification I was getting this weekend was about a player taken into custody or wanted for a certain crime. The first player arrested was Cody Latimer. He's a wide receiver for the Redskins. The cornerback for the Seahawks, Quentin Dunbar, and the quarterback for the Giants, DeAndre Baker, turned themselves in after arrest warrants were issued for them. a couple of days prior. DeAndre Baker was accused of using a semi-automatic firearm to rob multiple people with the help of Dunbar. Basically, he was an accomplice. And then, on Saturday evening, Ed Oliver was arrested on charges of DWI and unlawful possession of a weapon. It's just a shame. These are young guys. These are guys who are, they have potential and talent. And it just, I don't know what's going on. It just seems, I don't know, was quarantine making them crazy? I don't know. Is it making them upset? I don't know if it's, I don't know what's happening, and of course I say that sort of facetiously. But it really is a shame, because, we're during this tough time, we don't really have sports. Any news is going to be amplified, right? And so this news would have already been amplified pretty badly, and now that it's the only one of the, little bits of news that comes out of the NFL, there's even more of a magnifying glass on these players, and it just, to have so many players getting arrested in such a short period of time is a really bad look on the NFL. It's a shame. I hope these guys can get everything settled and get back on the right track, but I don't know if these guys are actually, convicted of these crimes. It seems like, at least, DeAndre Baker and Quentin Dunbar, they're pleading not guilty. But, basically these could be, career-ruining situations for these players, and it's unfortunate. But it is what it is. We'll definitely keep an eye on these stories, but I just wanted to touch on that it is a shame, and I hope things can definitely get turned around and get right. So the next thing I want to talk about, just to wrap up the show, is the new changes that have been made to the Rooney Rule. It's a subject that I touched on in the last episode, and I do want to mention just first and foremost the new they were trying to put in the new rule that would incentivize teams to hire minority coaches to give them higher draft picks. That has been tabled for now. So it hasn't been completely, dismissed. Tabling something, it's usually, so they can try and make it better, rework it, and get it to its optimum place before, signing it into, being a league rule or process. So that was good to see, because also what I said was, I was saying that I don't know if that was enough, to make a difference or the right sort of difference that we need. It seemed very simple, hey, hire minority, get a higher draft pick. And that's not necessarily what we want, right? Because it's much deeper, much more complex than that. And shouldn't be just, hey, we'll give you this reward for hiring minority coaches. So I like that. But now, for the changes for the Rooney Rule, teams will now be required to interview at least 2 candidates from outside their organization for any vacant head coaching job, and at least 1 minority candidate from outside the organization for any vacant offensive, defensive, or special teams coordinator job. Previously, the Rooney Rule had required teams to interview only 1 minority candidate for head coach and none for coordinator. So this is good. I really like this. I know, of course, there's going to be much more that the league needs to do. To change, the sentiment and the problems that, franchises have with the lack of hiring minorities. But, it's steps in the right direction. We're taking steps, and I can appreciate that. I do think, bigger steps need to be taken, but, sometimes, it's the small victories that matter. Now, this is interesting as well. The Rooney Rule is expanded to apply to a number of executive positions, Teams and the league office are now required to interview, quote, minorities and or female applicants, end quote, for positions such as team president and, quote, senior executives in communications, finance, human resources, legal, football operations, sales, marketing, sponsorship, info tech, and security positions, end quote. So that's very, very good. I appreciate them also adding the female applicants because, I can appreciate, seeing, females breaking boundaries, breaking, the sort of the gender barrier that there is in football. It's something, that I don't mind. I know a lot of, the problem is that, football is such a macho and aggressive sport that people, might think it's only for men. And even though, only men play the sport, there's no reason that a woman who knows what she's doing and is very qualified shouldn't be able to coach or, be in the office helping a franchise out. I really appreciate women figures in sports, and they don't only need to be in broadcast booths or on TV shows. They can do just as much as a man can on the football field. So hopefully things continue to change, and hopefully everything we can keep progressing forward. and seeing a bunch more diversity in the NFL. But as of right now, just those changes have been made. I just wanted to highlight those changes. Of course, there's a bunch more, but I like that now, coordinators are going to have to, when hiring a coordinator, you have to hire a minority as well, because it felt like, when people were hiring for head coaching jobs, it was, we want to hire offensive and defensive coordinators, and those were predominantly white men. So, to see that, hopefully we'll get more minority hires in the coordinator positions, and hopefully that will eventually lead to more minority head and coaching hires. But with that, guys, we're going to leave you here to end the show. I want to thank you for listening to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. As always, guys, it's very much appreciated. Hey, whatever you liked, whatever you didn't like, hopefully, leave it below. Let me know, let us know, because that helps us always keep it constructive and respectful, please. I hope you guys follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, any of those, social media platforms you guys may be on. And be sure to stay safe out there, guys. It's, we're in trying times, and I hope you all are staying happy, safe, and healthy. So with that, guys, again, thanks for listening. I want to wish you all a good night, and we'll see you here next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.